the 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the race for Public Service Commission District 5.
Welcome. I'm Tom Baxter, a columnist with the Supporter Report. You're watching the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate series originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is the debate among candidates for Public Service Commission District 5. The 5th District includes portions of the western part of the state, as far north as Cobb and Polk counties, and as far south as Talbot and Peach counties. For those of you who are not sure what the Public Service Commissioners do, when you turn on the lights, pick up the phone, or cook dinner, your Public Service Commissioners determine the amount you pay for your electricity, telecommunications, and natural gas. Let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Tricia Pridemore, the Republican candidate, was appointed to serve on the Public Service Commission by Governor Nathan Deal in January 2018. She is also the founder and chief marketing officer of an online marketing software company. Don Randolph, a Democrat, is a healthcare advocate and consultant to nonprofit organizations. And John Turpish is the Libertarian candidate and a software developer from Cobb County. Now let's meet our panelists. Molly Samuel is a reporter with WABE 90.1 FM. And Christy Schwartz is a reporter covering utilities and energy in the Southeast for E&E News. Now let's get started. For rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question. Molly Samuel, you'll get the first question to Tricia Pridemore.
Commissioner Pridemore, thanks for being here. We've seen the costs on Plant Vogtle continue to rise as construction has continued. Is there a point at which you believe it's not going to make sense for Georgia Power ratepayers?
Well, as you well know, Molly, at the Public Service Commission, we look at the utility rates specifically for Georgia Power customers. They're one of 4 partners within the Plant Vogtle project. So we review that through the Vogtle construction management process, where we just finished VCM 18, which is the 18th version of it. I believe that the project is tracking. Actually, it's currently tracking ahead of schedule, based upon the new schedule that was set in December prior to me joining the commission. And I believe that the project is tracking to be 2/3 ahead of its completion date. And so I would like to see us continue, not just with Plant Vogtle, but with all nuclear projects, continue to build out nuclear in the state of Georgia. I also want to say it's good to be here, and I want to thank the Atlanta Press Club, the moderator, and the panelists for taking the time out today to join us. Most folks aren't very interested in what happens at the Public Service Commission, so I'm always very excited when they are.
Christy Schwartz, you may now ask John Turpish a question.
John, your campaign website talks a lot about transparency. There's a fair amount of information that companies are allowed to file with the PSC under trade secret protection, arguing that it's proprietary. Do you have a plan on how to convince them that more of their information needs to be made available to the public?
It's not a specific plan, no. So when I was talking about transparency, first of all, thank you for the question and thank you for the invitation to be here. I was thinking more about the transparency from the commissioners themselves. I do appreciate the issues with the trade secrets. We need to minimize that. But unless we're working with the legislature, there are limits to what the commissioners can do. And so my focus is always to do what is within my power. I can't promise to change the law, certainly. That's not what the commission does. But we can try to convince the companies to not rely on that more than they have to. And we can try to convince the legislature to reduce that safeguard. Thank you.
And Molly, please ask a question to Don Randolph.
Thanks for being here. Next year, Georgia Power's next integrated resource plan will start going through the approval process. This sets kind of their priorities going out into the future. What kind of long-range planning would you like to see them focusing on?
Thank you, Molly, for that question. We do set an integrated resource plan for Georgia's energy mix. And what my top priority would be, I'd like to see a gig of solar in the resource plan every year that I'm on the commission for the next 6 years. So that when I am up again for re-election in 2024, we have 7 gigs of solar, which moves us more toward a renewable plan. I'd also like to see how the rate will impact everybody's bills, because that's the other thing, how that mix looks like. And we need to make sure that this is affordable and fair for every Georgian, that the mix has reliable and safe services, and looking at a sustainable energy future.
Thank you. That concludes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to one of their opponents. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal if that's necessary. By random selection, John Turpish, you may ask the first question to one of your opponents.
All right, thank you. So my question is for Tricia Pridemore. So back when Donald Trump was a candidate and you were a private citizen, I know that you weren't his #1 fan, neither was I, probably for different reasons. But since he was elected and you were appointed, you've repeatedly gone to the Trump administration for direction and photo ops. And I just want to know, will you always cozy up to whoever's in power in D.C., or is it just when it's Republican, just when it's convenient?
Mr. Turpish, as a commissioner and representing the state of Georgia, it's my responsibility to represent Georgia's interests to the federal government. I am honored that Secretary Rick Perry has appointed me onto a natural gas working committee to help other states that need to upgrade and modernize their natural gas infrastructure. That was a position that I did not seek, but that they sought me, and I'm grateful for that. It provides me a wealth of opportunity to not only look at ways that we can improve things here in Georgia, but also a way for us to share our best practices with other states. Just recently, I had the opportunity to travel to Boston the week after the 70 natural gas explosions. And I can tell you that community was wrecked by those circumstances. And what we were testing at the time was gas detection and leak technology. So I know that as a commissioner, I will continue to work on behalf of the best interest of Georgia with whomever I need to.
Mr. Turpish, you get 30 seconds to respond.
Certainly. So I don't care who's in the Oval Office. I want the feds to mind their own business and let Georgia decide what is right for Georgians. If anything, I would want to take that further and say that Atlanta should not be deciding for everyone in the state, just a few people up here. But at the very least, we should keep the decision at the state level.
Okay. Dawn Randolph, you may now ask a question to one of your opponents.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'd like to ask Mrs. Pridemore. Commissioner Stan Wise, who held this seat for 24 years and resigned in February, was asked if Plant Vogtle was to be finished in 2022. And the commissioner said he wouldn't bet his house on it. Are you willing to bet your house that Plant Vogtle will be operational by 2022 and come within budget of $27 billion?
I certainly cannot speak for my predecessor, Ms. Randolph, and certainly can't speak for his time on the commission. But I can talk to you about what I have seen through the VCM 18 process, where we've looked at Plant Vogtle, the 7,000 jobs that are on the ground, the people that it employs, and the growth potential from Plant Vogtle. You know, it's really a portion of our overall nuclear strategy. Today, we receive 16% of our state's energy. That's baseload power that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year from nuclear. When Plant Vogtle units 3 and 4 come online, we're going to see that rise to 25%. Think about that. Our light bulbs in our homes, a quarter of that is powered by nuclear power.
I believe, Ms. Randolph, you get a rebuttal.
Yes, thank you, Tom. You know, Plant Vogtle is $14 billion over budget and 5 years behind schedule. I wouldn't bet my house on it. I also know that the consumers and the workers are a hot potato between what's happening at Plant Vogtle every single year. And if you look at the new agreement, there are circuit breakers for every level of increase from $600 million to $1.6 billion to $2.1 billion. And I am very concerned at the health of Georgia Power. I'm concerned about the consumers because from the 18th to the 19th Vogtle Construction Management, it's going up from 10% to 10.4% in our rates. Thank you.
And Tricia Pridemore, it's your turn now to ask a question of one of your opponents.
I'll ask a question of Mrs. Randolph. Recently, California passed a law mandating that solar panels would go on all new construction, raising the price of new construction homes $8,000 to $10,000 per home. They also put a renewable standard in place saying that the state would use, not generate, but use only renewable energy by 2045. How would you implement that in Georgia?
It's actually really fascinating because I lived in Germany for 7 years as an Army brat. And what we're doing with Plant Vogtle of the $28 billion is what Germany did with taking their nuclear offline and putting renewables in. They invested in solar and renewables. And this past May, 82% of all of their energy was generated from renewable energy, which is really fascinating because we as taxpayers are putting $28 billion into Plant Vogtle. What would have happened if we could have done solar?
Thank you.
I'm disappointed to hear you say it that way because it's incongruent than things that you said on the campaign trail. But more importantly, I want to talk about your Germany example. You know, one of the facets of what we do at the PSC is work with the Georgia Department of Economic Development to bring about new jobs. And we talk about job growth in the state of Georgia. We've seen over the last 8 years unparalleled growth within our state in economic development. Companies such as Mercedes, who have turned away from Germany and not wanted to build there, and they've expanded here instead.
Thank you. That concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is the debate between candidates for Public Service Commission District 5. We'll now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions of the candidates when a rebuttal is appropriate. Christy Schwartz, you get the first question.
Okay, Tricia Pridemore, this one's for you. Ma'am, your website mentions rural broadband as one of your critical issues, and the state legislature is also looking at this issue and, in fact, has a study committee that's meeting this week. How does the PSC need to work with the legislature to ensure that all stakeholders are at the table?
Christy, that's a great question. I started a software business where the idea was born in my carport with my husband and our friend who's a fellow developer. And we built that business in our home and out of the spare bedroom. That was only possible for two reasons. We live in the greatest country that God ever created, and we were able to get online so that we could grow and we could build that business. We could develop at home. For us to continue growth and actually kickstart growth in rural Georgia, we've got to get them online. In 2018, I think it's a shame that we're not able to provide high-speed internet throughout the corners of Georgia. As a commissioner, it's one of the top two things that people ask me about most frequently. And I want to see us work with the General Assembly, work with all of the stakeholders to bring this about. This is the time when everybody gets a seat at the table and we work in what's in the best interests for Georgians.
Thank you. Molly?
Mr. Turpish, you're a libertarian running for a regulatory commission. Mm-hmm. How do you envision bringing a free market deregulatory viewpoint to the work that the PSC does?
That's an excellent question. We're certainly not going to get to a free market in a mere 6 years. We're far too far away from that. What I want to see is a freer market. So there are 16 states, for example, that have more consumer choice in electricity than Georgia does. And they're not crazy radical states. They're places like Texas, Ohio, Maine, Pennsylvania. And I think that is my primary goal. There are some limitations as to how much of that can be implemented using just the Commission's power, especially since I would be merely one vote. But that is the goal. That is the direction we need to go in. And when we can't have more choices in the hands of individuals, then communities. And when we can't have choices in the hands of communities, then we need to try to crowdsource the decisions that are made at the state level. I want to be a representative of Georgians, not a leader. The voter is the boss, not the sheep. Thank you.
Christy Schwartz.
Okay. Don Randolph, this question's for you. The PSC only oversees Georgia Power and electricity matters, as I know you know. But would you encourage all of the state's electricity providers to work together with other stakeholders to develop some sort of a long-term energy guideline for Georgia?
I think that is actually a great opportunity, Christy, because when I worked for the Department of Community Affairs, I worked with city and county governments. I actually went and managed and looked at how the utilities were being managed and budgeted. And we do need an energy plan for the state. And I would be so excited to pull all of those stakeholders together and find ways that we can look at, because air, clean water, health of people does not have any borders or any boundaries. So we do need a unified energy plan for Georgia.
Now a question from Molly Samuel.
Commissioner Pridemore, you've discussed coal ash in the past,
yes,
and your work on that. It's largely regulated by the EPA and Georgia EPD. Can you talk about your work in it, your involvement with it, and you know how that goes through the PSC?
Thanks for that question, Molly. As a commissioner, this is a question that comes up a lot as I travel the state, especially when I'm near coal plants. So the Georgia Power Company, with a great deal of encouragement from the PSC, has implemented a program in place so that they can completely change the way that the state manages coal ash. There's a real financial upside for us in doing this. If we can get ahead of the federal government and regulations that could come down from EPA in this administration or the next, we're in a position to where we can modify the way that we manage and dispose of coal ash while also utilize more of the byproduct of it. You know, most people don't recognize that through that coal burning process, we get bottom ash that we use for concrete and cinder blocks. We're also using gypsum as part of the process, which is used by Georgia farmers. So there's a lot more to it than just managing out everything that comes from a coal plant. The technology that's been deployed has made coal cleaner and cleaner over the years as well.
Okay. Next question from Christy Schwartz.
John Turpish, this is for you. So Georgia Power has to file its long-term energy plan next year. Give me a better sense of what you would want to see in it, and what would you do if the company disagreed with your plan?
Right. So ultimately, that shouldn't be up to me, of course, but long-term, I want to reflect the values I've seen from Georgia so that for example, I do want to see solar increased, and the reason I know that, you know, out on the campaign trail, I'll ask people, you know, how much of your energy do you think comes from solar, and what percentage would you like that to be? They always pick a number that's too high and then pick a number that's higher than that, and that tells me we need to encourage more of that. I also want to see more decentralized energy. So more site generation and more localized grids. The other part of the question was, what would I do if they disagree with that? They simply won't get my vote. If they're not cooperating with this commissioner doesn't cooperate with them.
Molly Samuel.
Ms. Randolph, you've said that you'd like to see a cap on Plant Vogel's costs. How would you do that?
Risk sharing with Georgia Power, Molly. We need to make sure that the consumers are not the ones picking up the tab every time we go over billions of dollars. We need to risk share. And if you look at the 18th Vogel Construction Management, Georgia Power proposed that they would risk share $700 million. But $400 million in contingency funds would basically be considered at a later date, and we could probably be picking up the tab for that. So risk sharing is really important. But I'd like to go back to the coal ash question, if I could, for a second, because risk sharing is obvious. Coal is not clean. My family's from Pittsburgh. I've visited my family when they were young. We've had friends and family members with COPD, die of lung cancer. Coal is never clean.
Ms. Pridemore, do you want to respond to that?
I'm running to stay on the commission here in Georgia. I don't know what's going on up in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Next question from Christy Swartz.
Okay. Tricia Pridemore.
Yes.
While campaigning, if you meet someone who doesn't know about the Public Service Commission and who probably doesn't care about the Public Service Commission, how do you explain what the agency does and why it's important?
It's my job to keep the lights on and make sure that they don't pay too much for it, in a nutshell. And we do so much more. You know, when folks out on this stump, they rarely talk to us about Plant Vogtle. They rarely talk to me about Plant Vogtle. Sometimes they do. But more often than not, when I'm outside of Atlanta, they want high-speed internet, and they want natural gas. They want to move off of propane and onto gas. So we talk about planning and capacity measures. We talk about what next year in the IRP and the CSP on the gas side looks like. Here in Metro Atlanta, more often than not, people think that we regulate mobile phones and their cable provider. I still joke and say I get more complaints about cable than I do about anything revolving nuclear. But it's my job to make sure that people understand all that the Public Service Commission does to help them and the way that they can interface and interact with me in ways that I can help them with their bills or I can help them with their energy planning. We've done a lot of energy efficiency work since I've been on the commission, and I'm really proud of that.
Thank you. One more question from Molly Samuel.
All right, Commissioner Pridemore, I'm going to ask you one last question. You say on your website that you want to guard against subsidizing social programs through the PSC. What programs are you concerned about, and what are you worried about happening there?
Well, Molly, when you look at other states and the way that they're producing energy and managing energy, many states are propping up other industries. Look at the example from California that I gave earlier. California is looking to push their mantra on climate change and renewable standards, and they're doing so off the backs of taxpayers. There's nothing about that bill that they've passed into law that's not going to do anything but continue to increase their rates. What it did was it brought them up to be 53% higher than the average national average for utility bills, and they're still 72% higher than ours. We have not had a rate increase in Georgia since 2011, and I want us to continue to grow smartly, grow succinctly, continue to grow our solar fleet, but do so in the common sense way that we've been doing it.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Dawn Randolph, you get the first closing statement.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for listening in today, because the Public Service Commission is a critical agency that will set your utility rates, that regulates all of our energy and sets the prices. I'm an Army brat, and my family has been here for 30 years because my dad retired from Fort Gillem. And what I know for sure is that our energy assets do not need to negatively impact our environment or our health. I know that because I worked for Senator Sam Nunn, I am an adjunct professor who tells my students that they need to look at things that the projects will come on time and on budget. And so we hold your purse. And I ask you, who do you trust to hold your purse the next time the rates are set for the Georgia Public Service Commission on your utility bill? Thank you all. I'm Dawn Randolph.
Thank you. Tricia Pridemore, your turn for a closing statement.
I want to thank the Press Club, Georgia Public Broadcasting, the moderator and the panelists for coming out today. I want to continue to serve you on the Georgia Public Service Commission. I want to continue to serve you because I know that my philosophy of low rates, reliable service, and diversified energy is what's in the best interest of Georgians. It's continuing the smart, common sense growth that we have continued as a state to be one of not only the number one state in which to do business, but also one of the top states for job creation. See, at the heart of all this, I'm a job creator. I've created real jobs with paychecks for real Georgians. And this election is a real choice. And I would like for you to humbly consider casting your ballot for me. Please reach out to me anytime I can be of service to you. My website is pridemorepsc.com. Thank you. May God bless you. May God bless your family. May God bless your business. And may God continue to bless this great state of Georgia.
Thank you. And John Turpish, you get the final closing statement.
Thank you. I am not just a candidate. I'm also a voter. And as voters, we need to vote with not just our hearts, but also our minds. If your heart is telling you your vote is your voice and you want to support candidate A, but others are telling you you need to vote for B to stop C, I hope your mind will jump in and say, here in Georgia, the ideal strategy in our system is to vote for your favorite, and if it doesn't work out, vote for your second favorite in the runoff. I hope that, if your mind is saying, we need change, I want change, but I'm afraid of the risk, I hope your mind jumps in and says, in one election, the most change you can get is to have a greater diversity of thought in government, and that's actually less risky than the current situation. To your heart, I want to say we won't make history unless we take the first step. And to your mind, I say, what do you have to lose? So I hope you'll join me. My name is John Turpish, turpish.vote. Join me on November 6th, and let's spring a leak in that dam. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th, and early voting begins October 15th. Our thanks to the candidates and to the panel of journalists. I'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging today's debate. For more information on the full schedule of general election debates, please visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, gpb.org. I'm Tom Baxter. Thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.